here. Well, for a little while I think it's good. And I also think it's area by area, region by region, shall we say. Things need to be adjusted. We are ready to strike, Commander. Simultaneously, we launched the Lubin offensive to relieve Leningrad, the Vezhma operation to push the enemy further away from Moscow, and finally our third major offensive begins here in the region of Novgorod. Your goal is the liberation of large areas from enemy occupation and to cut off enemy forces between Damyansk and Molotski, the Stedka, again that's like their high command. It is sure these units were ordered to hold their ground, so will not react unless they are under direct attack. But the strategic objective of your advance is here with the Vezhma operation west of Moscow. Is far more ambitious. Concluding multiple offensives successfully would enable us to ultimately defeat Army Group Center in further attacks. Seal off stronger German forces near Damyansk. That's an important name. Just a second, I'm opening a Coke. Do not waste time in direct attacks there. Instead, focus on your main goals. Movement is difficult in this region, so plan carefully to reach your objectives in time. Fortunately, the enemy is spread thin here, so we expect only sporadic resistance. Air operations are restricted until the weather improves. Due to the lack of air bases in this area, it is advised to locate and seize the enemy airstrip we assume to be between Kholm and Andripol, according to intercepted radio messages. Okay. Primary objectives. Take all primary objectives, which are 4 of them. Deploy no more than 5 core tanks. Do not deploy any heavy core tanks. And within this, win the battle decisively in 28 turns. Okay, that's sort of the time limit. Also, more British aid has arrived via the Arctic convoy route recently, enabling us to use more foreign equipment. The first Corps unit, Valentine tank deployed, refunds 4 command points if present after turn 1. Okay, that's good to know. Our comrades east of Damyansk are ordered to keep their defensive posture while your advance is underway. Those forces remain under AI control. Those signified with a orange icon. So yes, now what I'm going to do is I did play the first turn or so, but more importantly I have pre-set up my starting so we don't have to go through all of that slow work here. Very well, maybe get freed up. I'd have, like I say, I've only just sort of played the very first elements of, I mean, through turn 1 and maybe half of turn 2 kind of thing. Not even completed that, so I do not know beyond that, but we have our core units here, so we're going to start out. Is this? Yeah, this is just still, we're still in the deployment phase. Okay, so, and the deployment phase, yes, we know our objectives, which have the stars. And this is all known as the Toropet Kholm, not exactly sure you pronounce it, offensive. And so we need to rush down into this area and take these units here, but we also need to deal with our northern flank. Not to drive in and take up here, but just to sort of deal with the pocket. At least that's how I'm interpreting all of this. Let's move our... We've got a 222, SDKFZ 222. Not the most successful attack. And I wanted to completely and utterly obliterate it. Yeah. Yep. Pack 36. So we're pushing back their reconnaissance car. Sure, there's going to be Germans there. Okay, they're just a little too far away. No, they're not. Why was I thinking that? No. Opening barrages on them. Now that should make them... Okay, now they have... artillery there. And for reconnaissance, hopefully they'll fall back if needed. Ah, yes, there we are. Okay, let's... see if we can take out this fortified position here. Yeah, you come up and around it. Putting a lot of pressure on them. Haven't we moved? Oh, these guys, well, I guess they're just sitting there. That's it. Alright. There we go. So we've hit them. We're pushing them hard. They have an anti-tank gun, artillery piece, Panzer 3H there, infantry unit there, and it is snowing. Okay, the tanks are repositioning. That's interesting. Okay. Northwest Front radios that their offensive near Staraya Rosa has commenced and is planned and now as planned and now aims to cut off the demands from the north. Expect updated orders when their troops are entering the sector. Okay, so they will tell us how to react to that once it is in here. Okay, so we want to keep up the pressure here. We have to move the well, the artillery could hit there. We'll see about that if we want to hit or move this turn. We'll take these guys out. Fully, very good. Now we'll move them in. Pursue, pursue, pursue. There look like some giant rocket launcher or mortar. Oh, in the picture it looked like a mortar to me too. Okay, so we're pushing pretty hard down there. Now up here is our armored front. Oh, they have a 75mm infantry gun up there. Rather light gun, but still it could be a bit much. Wow! Well, thank you, Kenobish Bosch, for rating. That is great to have your viewers here. Thanks so much. Do appreciate that. Okay, so we can keep pushing here. That is really cool. Ah, yes, Paolo. I do like Paolo. He does a really good job when he presents the streams. Like the Home of the Wargamers and other similar streams that he does. And everyone, if you haven't already, please, as I hear many of you doing, for following the channel. We do appreciate that greatly. We present many historically based game videos on this channel here by many different great creators from Twitch and YouTube. Okay, so we're pushing in here now. Not just because of this, I want to do something a little different than normal. And you're hearing the music cut off because, well, let's see what we can do with this. Let's just drop this down here. So I wanted to talk briefly. I'm going to show it to you here once I get it, and that's up. I wanted to put this battle into context of the history and what's going on. Okay, this order of battle mission, whatever you want to call it, is based on the Toropets Kholm Offensive. It was a military operation conducted south of Lake Ilmen by the Red Army during World War II. This is January through February 42 we're looking at. Background: following the success of the counteroffensive in December 41, the Stetka, we've already sort of saw this in the basic wide-ranging effects here. The initial penetration with the 3rd and 4th Shock Armies was very successful. Soviet forces in this sector were overrun with, or the German forces in this sector, were overrun with heavy losses. The failure to predict the attack, coupled with multiple demands on the German reserves, gave the Soviet front command an opening which it exploited to the utmost, driving deep into the German rear. While the Soviet forces had few supplies at the start of the offensive, they could keep going through the capture of significant amounts of German forces stored at Toropets. Okay, the tank support, and this is why you're seeing a lot of what's going on at the start of this mission, why they were encouraging you not to have too many armored units in this, is tank support for this operation was very weak, especially compared to the requirements of the doctrine of deep operations. The practice later in the war showing the dearth of resources in the Soviet arsenal, a low point of Soviet forces in the war. So 12 Lend-Lease Matildas, 9 Valentines, 10, you can see here, 10 T-60s, really light tanks here, 4 KV-1s, 6 T-34s, and 20 more T-60s. The drive of the Soviet forces was so strong that the defending German formations, the 123rd Infantry Division, which was covering a line of 30 kilometers or 19 miles for the Americans, had its forward 2 regiments overrun. The regiments were so thinly spread in their strong points that they could not cover each other, allowing the Soviet assault forces to simply walk through between them. The strong points were later reduced with significant casualties. For the Germans, the German reserves, the 81st Infantry Division, was brought in by rail during the last days of December. Its 1st Regiment, the 189th Infantry under the Colonel Holmeyer, together with the 2nd, completely destroyed on the 14th of January. 1,100 dead were later found in the forest, including the regimental commander, who was posthumously promoted to Major General. A total of 40 survivors from the artillery battalion made it back to German lines. The move into the action and the collapse was so swift that the regiment was not identified on German situation maps. Okay, so we're seeing here the context. Oh yeah, this DLC is very good if you're at all interested in this side of the war. So we're seeing the situation, and this is what's important here to take away from it. The Germans didn't even think the widespread offensive was even possible, so they did not really plan on it, because the offense was so pushed on such a large front that the standard German practice of having a screening element, if you will, divisions out there holding the line and using reserves to deal with any attack, just gets overwhelmed. Because to hold everything, got to remember this, everyone, to hold everything is to hold nothing. You can't just spread your front out like a thin line. You're not going to hold it, because at any point you can be penetrated by a strong attack, and the rest of the line can just be held by pitting attacks. So you have to keep a reserve up. Now, what the Germans were unprepared to do, and this goes back to the high command in Hitler, was unprepared to have the idea of, oh hell, we're being attacked here, let's shift back, let's fall back, let's give ground, and then regroup, and then crush the incoming offensive. They were stuck with the idea of gotta hold ground. And here we see that they were just way too unprepared for any sort of attack at this time. Okay, and the person that is historically running this battle, and I read up about him, is Pavel Kurochkin, I thought it was quite interesting to sort of get to know who some of these Soviet commanders were. We in the West, at least, who, and especially my age, who grew up during the Cold War era, had very little access to the Soviet side of things. It's either the Western viewpoint or the German viewpoint. So I thought it would be interesting to look at who we are seeing commanding this from the Soviet side of things. And I thought not just his name, but a bit about him. He was born in Smolensk area, joined the Red Army in 1918, completed cavalry courses in Petrograd in 1920. So I guess he wasn't involved in the Great War against the Germans. The year that he also joined the Bolshevik Party, he graduated the Red Army High Cavalry School in 23. Okay, and other things. Now, during the Russian Civil War, he saw action against General Pyotr Korozhnov, the British American intervention in the north. That's, Murmansk area. And General Nikolai Yedovich, in 1919, commanded a cavalry regiment in the Polish-Soviet War, was involved in the suppression of the Tambov Rebellion, which I know nothing about. In 1921, in 35, he was promoted commander of a cavalry division. After the Soviet-Finnish War broke out, he took over command of the 23rd Rifle Corps. Now, got to remember something like when we're seeing Rifle Corps, we're often really thinking, though, in Western terms, more like a rifle division, just the way the structure and size varies. From 40 to 41, he served as commander-in-chief of the 1st Army Group in Mongolia, which is interesting. So he has avoided the initial attacks, I guess. Well, in Mongolia. Okay, commanding the 17th Mongolian Army, Commander-in-Chief. In July 41, he was given command of the 20th Army, which participated in the unsuccessful... Okay, so he's been moved west here. Defense of Smolensk. He briefly held command of the 43rd Army in August 41 until a promotion of Commander-in-Chief of the Northwest Front. He held the post until October 1942. Okay, so that gets up to where we are. So I just wanted to cover who this person was, at least up until this point. Yes, goes on to 68, it looks like, in operations. So that's who we see here with this stuff. And I just wanted to cover a little bit more who these people are, because we're so familiar with, Gudering, Rommel, von Manstein, Dietl, and, Sepp Dietrich, the Leibstandarte SS, and Paul Hauser, also the SS. All these names just are so familiar to many of us in the West, and we may have, of course, viewers in other parts of the world. No pension in sight. It was maybe one of the coziest places in the former Soviet Union, yes. So that's just who is, and the context of what we're playing as here. So just keep that in mind as we continue pushing in deeper. Okay, so all of our real movement is going to be based on these roads. Maybe this would be more efficient. Okay, well, you might as well creep a little bit forward. Okay, we have our armored car. We have that armored car. The actually French Panhard, although it's in German service. Oh, we can come down here and push on these infantry a bit. Is a little better than the BA-10s. I don't doubt that. Those are pretty good. That Germans used all they could get their hands on. Yeah. Hey, Pixel. It's, and you never know, especially with quote-unquote heroes of the Great Patriotic War. I'm sure in the 1950s and whatever, they were probably still very active in command and such. But by the 60s and the 70s, age is probably catching up, and they may be honorary positions, honorary commands, that kind of thing. I have no idea. I just don't know enough. Again, it's more and more information is still coming out, but it is still a bit of a dark area in history, just simply by the lack of information. And I can, quite honestly, and those of you who have seen enough of my streams know, I can talk much more familiar about operations like in North Africa or Northwest Europe from the Allied perspective, or things from the German perspective, just because I've read and studied so much of that over the years. This is, I thought would be a little interesting to look at that. Okay, now, notice we now have 4, we had none before, we now have 4 command slots and some command points because we are using some Lend-Lease Valentine Mark IIs. So we're going to purchase, I think, another just standard Soviet infantry is what we can do. Purchase, get a truck with it so they can catch up to the front, because they're going to start back here. So this is a way to the Valentine discount. Yes, the Valentine discount. So we have that to represent the idea that we're using. I would say the Valentines are inferior to the T-34s at this time period for various elements to them. So yeah, so we have that as a bit of a bonus. Okay, see we have some stugs there. They're going to come down and pressure that town, see if there's anybody still there. Now remember, one of our big goals here is not to let the Germans escape, so we want to keep pressing on them and encircle them. Now I shifted him up there mostly to cover for that, but we have these guys now breaking out around. I know we have the infantry gun up there, but he's not influencing this move. Again, I'm not going to try to push up into there, but I am trying to secure, cover, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I guess we'll do that. Just barely in range, and yeah, I guess we'll. Not exactly what I had hoped. A little more strongly pushing this way. No, we still haven't entirely. Better than Sherman's? Well, I disagree. Shermans have this sort of reliability element that a lot of other units, I don't know which is better to move forward. Both Soviet infantry. Okay, well, we'll just do this. We'll move you that way. You've already moved. Not attacking, we're just mostly pinning them there to move that artillery up. They've already moved. And part of my evaluation on the Valentine versus the T-34 is its reliability. British tanks don't quite have the reliability that the American tanks do, but I would say they would tend to have better reliability than the Soviet tanks. And you got to remember, a tank, we often think about it, and especially if you play things like World of Tanks or War Thunder, you know, it's tank on tank. And which is the better tank on tank? Well, tanks are often used, like we're using them here, to shoot at infantry. So the ability to drive, the ability to keep advancing is a very important factor. And the Shermans have that very, very much. So, and they're not bad at the other elements either. So it's, oh, we can, well, it's, oh, we're not going to attack. You can't really do anything. They're just entrenched. No need to attack right now. You can keep coming down here. That probably should have been my first attack. But we live, we learn. This will at least get them into supply for next turn. Those T-34s. Really just didn't want it to escape. Yeah, we'll risk the truck. I don't think they'll move out of their entrenched positions. Our reconnaissance tanks up this way. See what we can find. Well, I guess it's best to come that way, keep our infantry moving forward. Now, yeah, since they're in such dense woods, our armor cannot attack them. Well, not producing enough tanks is a serious concern. I would say that their tanks were generally good. You always have to, when you're evaluating these things, look at the date that you're looking at. Meaning a 1941 tank compared to a 1943 tank, yeah, they're not the same situation there. So German tanks had rather good quality, decent armor, generally good guns. I say generally. So they were pretty good. Now, not enough. That's a definite. Element that they did not have able to produce enough. Well, yes, but you have to look at the Panzer IV in 1940, you know, invasion of France. It's a support tank. The Panzer III is sort of the main tank, and its 37mm gun can deal with just about everything out there effectively, except for the Char B and the Matilda II. And so, yeah, the two heavy tanks, it does not do well. The Germans were somewhat aware of this before, obviously. They did have, they were making the Jagdpanzer 1. No, we're not going to do that. Oh, you get to move into there. Okay. Oh, you don't get to take it. Okay, whoa, that may have not been a good idea. Well, we'll see. They may move out of their position then. Well, I don't know if we loot tanks or the Bupanzers or however you pronounce that. Oh, rocket launchers. Okay, air operations are about to resume on both sides as the heavy snowfall comes to an end. We expect the Luftwaffe presence in the area to be limited, though. Okay, so we have 16 air command points. Very good. Well, let's first deal with this turn. Okay. Let's hit that. But I'm not going to pursue it north of it. It retreats. Okay. We're going to stay in the woods there, I guess. Because our goal is to push out through to here. Okay, I'm going to presume they are up. Well, we found light infantry guns and infantry. You can see one of the slower elements with the Valentine. Can you get to Stormovik yet? I'm not sure. We will check that out in a moment. Like I said, I'm not super well informed on like the date of when the things like the Stormovik when it first came out. Okay, well, he's moving slowly through the woods. Fairly heavy artillery on them. Well, since we know where they went. Now we're back into supply here. There we are. Very good. That will allow us to keep advancing this way. Oh, well, maybe that was an entirely wasted exercise. Get me down here. The P-38 that the Soviets use as well. Yeah, you're talking about the Aero Cobra and various versions beyond that, I think. The Americans eventually get to them. I'm pretty sure, since America's not even in the war yet, that isn't coming now. Okay, now let's come to purchasing. MiG-3 Yak. Well, they said that there's not necessarily going to be a lot of Luftwaffe, so we're going to go with the Hurricane too. Yeah, we'll go with a British fighter. Fairly cheap. Keep with the Lend-Lease theme. Well, the Aleutian, there we go. The IL-2, the Sturmovik, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. 100 points, 3, yep. Could we do another 80 strategic? What do you guys suggest? How much fighter coverage should we put to this? Can you buy the rocket launcher? Well, right now we are out of ground command points, so we do have for artillery. We do have the BM-13 Katusha, if that's what you're talking about there. But we are out of choice. It doesn't have very good range, so I went with proper artillery then over that. But that is an option. So do we go with a... another fighter or not? Or just with more Sturmoviks, more IL-2s? Any hints in chat? Well, okay. So, well, I think we're going to be bold and do that. I'm going to wait one turn to get some more command points, or not, or yeah, not command points, but requisition points before I buy another one, just so that we can, when we decide to, we can upgrade. Keep pushing forward. They only have limited range because they were out of it. Yeah, it's the Katusha I meant. Normally in winter, the Luftwaffe had heavy problems because of their petrol. Yeah, the petrol was definitely an element. They had serious problems over engine oil and that being just too cold to even get the engine started. There was a lot of problems going on, because you got to realize when an aircraft goes really high up in the air, it's really cold up there. That's why you see particularly like World War I pilots getting ready to get into a fighter airplane, and they're just, in furs basically, and the leather flight helmet and all that stuff, because it is just so cold up there, partially because of the wind chill. They're outside with those, and it helps. But they still dress fairly warmly even in World War II, and particularly like the B-17 bomber crews with their open windows, and for the side gunners and whatnot to deal with the cold up there. But those engines are already hot and running by the time they get up there. But it's starting them on the ground in the cold is where it can be a very serious problem.